The following podcast is taken from a live broadcast on Inspire FM.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Book Club show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana Mahmood and I'm the host of the Book Club show. Obviously, we're all probably getting ready and gearing up for going back to school, those of us that are parents. We are going to have to get back to those early morning school runs and definitely out of our pajamas first thing in the morning for sure. Now, today I'm really delighted to be talking about a wonderful book by a Luton-based author and writer who I think has had a fantastic journey in terms of her creative writing and all the things that hopefully we're going to talk about today. So the book itself is called The Sickness, and as always I'll just read out the blurb to give you an idea of what this story is about. So the way it goes: Hero Shuiri lives a semi-comfortable life in the middle of a forest inhabited by territorial jinns, except for the minor annoyance of being possessed by a vampire spirit. He has an easy job, cleaning up after the creatures of the secret world that run riot in human cities. He must hide the existence of demons from humans, but this life becomes a lot more interesting and dangerous when he is attacked on what was supposed to be a straightforward job. Hero's world turns destructive and dark when he discovers the creatures of the secret world are being infected by a sickness that is driving them insane. While Hero investigates the cause of this sickness, a new dark power appears that has the potential to devastate both the human and spirit world. Darkness and death, monsters and madness clash in a world gone insane. So that is the amazing blurb of The Sickness. And this has been written by the wonderful writer Yazarah. So I'm going to give a quick introduction before I start having a wonderful conversation with her. So Yazarah is a psychology graduate and author. She works full-time for CAMS, which is Children and Adolescent Mental Health Services, and writes fantasy novels in her spare time. Yazarah is breaking stereotypes through her writing, raised in a broken home and fighting for an identity as a British Muslim. She's inspired by her religion and the family and friends suffering from a mental illness. Her fascination with the supernatural started young, wandering through woods, watching horror films and drawing witches instead of princesses. Yazarah's passion for fantasy and dedication towards mental health is interwoven in her books. Her interest in diverse cultures also features in her writing. So that was an introduction to Yazarah. So I'm going to say Assalamu alaikum to Yazarah. How are you this morning?
Alaikum salam. I'm good. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time out to speak to me as well on the Book Club show. So that was like a really epic, blurb to the book. And I love obviously, what's included in the introduction to yourself as well. Can we maybe start by talking a little bit about what inspired you to become a writer?
I think writing started quite early for me. Right when I'm in primary school. So I had a difficult childhood, but also I didn't do too well in school in general. So I struggled in a lot of my subjects, but I found the one thing that I was pretty good at and enjoyed was writing. Mainly stories, little short things that I made up during class. And funny enough, it was one of the only things that I was actually praised for in school as well, which probably boosted my confidence there too. So that really was the starting point of writing in general. And then I suppose from then on, definitely the encouragement of my mother and my teachers to continue on that kind of journey of writing and see it as a talent and not sort of brush it off and say, why can't I be so good with maths, for example? And trying to foster that. And then I think that definitely helped me continue it, but also the enjoyment. So creative writing for me had always been an escapism, an outlet, in a way to sort of express myself in a different way. I suppose not being able to sort of understand and say some of the things that might have been going on for me in childhood was difficult in itself. So this is sort of a relatively safe medium where I could do that. And I think on top of that, though, not having that pressure either. So when I did write, it wasn't because I had a purpose. I wasn't doing it for marks or because I needed to get something done. It was really for myself. And so that made it super personal. So it was sort of the one thing that I suppose I owned, or it was completely a reflection of myself. I suppose I didn't know it back then when I was that young, but I did know that it was something very personal, because I didn't let anybody read it. Not even my mom, no one. So it was very much like a diary. I did keep a diary when I was very young, but a very inconsequential things like, well, I did that day, as you do when you're a child. But yeah, so this became, I suppose, a bit more of a mature form of a diary, I would say.
Yeah. That's really, really interesting to hear. And like, what, when you say that the encouragement from your mom and teachers, I mean, how important do you think actually a role does that play on a young person? And then how young are we talking about? Are we when was it primary school or was it secondary?
Yeah, well, I suppose it definitely started in primary school. So I would say roughly year 5, I think. Right. When I really had that true encouragement from a teacher for the first time ever. So from the teacher aspect, which I would say is incredibly important, because school is the, at that moment in your life, it really is the be all and end all. It's really important to you, and I suppose rightly so. Family also puts that kind of emphasis on doing well in school as well. So when a teacher praised you, then so did your parents praise you as well. So it's like, when you did well in something, you get the double reward for that. So I do think that encouragement really did play a massive part in boosting that confidence, because especially as I mentioned, I wasn't doing quite so well in other areas. So it did give a little bit of I can do something well in the end, and so it came that one aspect of that. But then, and I would say a massive influence of my mother in all aspects of my life. But with writing, I would say it's just I think what was important is that freedom to allow me to do that in such a way. So it seems like a simple thing, but it's just as freeing as allowing a child to do drawings and stick it up on the fridge, or run around in the park and trip over. It's okay. But it's that freedom to and acceptance, I think. So she would want that, read some of my very, very early childhood stories, still talking about, castles and walls in the forest, and those very simplistic ones, but my mom would read every single one of them, and she would have the same enthusiasm for each one, even if they were pretty much exactly the same as the previous ones. And that plays a massive part.
That's really, really lovely to hear, because I think that's, I mean, for any parents that are listening, I know that there is obviously our children are always producing stuff, and and how, I mean, there's a whole thing about how long does it take for something that they've made to end up in the recycle, or but right. I guess but that's just it. I think, and it's really interesting what you said. It has to be that partnership between teachers and parents. So when teachers kind of notice your potential maybe first, and then it has an impact on parents and vice versa. So I just thought that was really important, a point to kind of mention. But I guess what I'm really interested in knowing, and I know this is something maybe we spoke about before the show, like, so personally, books that I've read, I haven't read many which are kind of like fantasy based, and I just wanted to know where that came from. What led you down that kind of genre of writing?
Well, that really goes to reading, kind of like you mentioned. So the kind of books you read and enjoy, I suppose, is naturally going to be what you enjoy writing, or what kind of ideas you get from. So definitely reading there. And again, I do think it's that very critical age for me anyway, personally. of that kind of primary age again, where I was interested in reading. I did always enjoy reading.
Okay.
My mum always read books to me ever since I was young, and there was this I can't remember exactly when, but round about the time when you start to be able to read independently, so you don't need that guidance, we don't need someone to really sit with you and read. So around that time, I still love reading, but I just couldn't find anything that really interested me. So I'd read, the school books that you have to do in class, or you read along with all the general popular books that were out. I think for my age group at that time, a massive author was Jacqueline Wilson.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody loved her, and I read a couple of books, and they were great. I mean, they were. I'm not knocking that, but there was only so many of those books that I could really engage with. So similar things, and then and then the more I explored, the more I tried different genres, and of course back then, again, I suppose emphasizing these influences. So my English teacher handed me the Harry Potter book,
right,
and I fell in love, and that was it. That was my introduction. That second introduction, actually. Sorry, I thought of something else, into the fantasy world, and this whole idea of being in a world that's sort of basically not real for me back then. And that's what did it for me, and it hooked me from that point on. So yeah, definitely with the books. And then I just remembered, actually, that's why I said actually my second introduction. I remember my first one actually is again, it's funny what you remember, but again, reading with my mum, and we had these it was a children's book series, and it was Tim and Tobias. They're discontinued now, which is a real shame, but they're full of this mystery and sort of little gems of magic and magical worlds in there too. Even from when I was young, I was like, to have different varieties and different things to explore, and I remember being so fascinated with those books, which is when I mentioned that when you did your introduction of me really well there, thank you, was about drawing witches, and I actually drew characters from that book. That's where it came from. So even from an incredibly young age, just sort of that influence or those interests started playing in there for me.
No, and that's lovely to hear. And I think, the power of reading, and I mean, that's partly the reason, I do mention this sometimes during the show, that of doing the book club show, on Inspire, it is about rekindling that love of reading, even though maybe some of us struggle to find the time, but actually how important it is. And especially, again, the younger that you start maybe, or the younger that you're encouraged. I mean, I know, like, even with my children, there was a whole phase of, they were just like, no, that they didn't feel like reading, and I was constantly trying to encourage in a nice way, but alhamdulillah, I mean, it took a bit of time, but I think, number one, obviously I read, so there was a bit of not role modeling, whatever the word is, and now I'm literally telling them bedtime, put your books down, like, go to bed, and so it is, I think, just that consistency pays off, but it's true that introduction via books to like alternate worlds and realms and universes is really, really amazing. And I think that's why, I mean, coming to the book that you've written, The Sickness, and obviously, okay, we've touched upon how you kind of entered the more fantasy type of stories, like you mentioned Harry Potter as well. But now, obviously, the fact that as someone who's, as a Muslim woman, and obviously when I read the blurb out as well, the reference to jinns and things like that. So how did you kind of marry those two things up? Was that your faith playing a part in what that story was kind of about?
Oh, definitely, absolutely. My faith, my religion, and is a major part of that. And to be honest, with this book, I would say you probably doesn't show maybe as much as in reality, but I went through a lot of phases in my life while writing that book. So I started writing maybe the very first early drafts of that when I was 12, and kind of finished the main draft of it when I was 14 years old. So, as well as being the developmental age, but I went through this whole understanding of religion phase as well. What you understand as a 12-year-old is completely different from when you're a teenager, that independence and you finding your own way. and I really did that. And when I kind of hit those teenage years, I was really trying to find my own meaning and my own way with religion.
Yeah.
I don't know what I mean by that is, of course, we, again, with the influence from my family, I was, praying, fasting, we did all the obligations, but it was not to put a bad reflection on anything, but I did what the family did, and I did what everyone does without really truly knowing the meaning behind anything that I was actually doing and practicing.
Yeah.
So then I just and so what I did is I started to explore that more in a very similar way children would explore anything else, and I think that's really important, is to explore your own religion too. So that be curious, know the stories behind it, and that was a major thing again, which I think relates back to reading and writing and everything, is that knowing the stories of the Quran, knowing the stories of our own religion, because they are amazing within itself. Is the best book you can read, really.
Yeah.
But as a child, that again, religious wise influenced me in that. So of course we need to know, further, we need to know the practicalities, but as a child, what you're interested in is those beautiful stories, is the things that are behind that. And again, back down to my mother's amazing influence, she would read me these children's stories or stories about prophets, and that's what really started my own personal love for my religion. But then at the same time, again, like the same with the being in many phases, I was also still going through my phase of the love of fantasy still, and books and writing, and also so that's my religion just being part of who I am as a person, as how I live. How can that not be part of my writing then? So and then I think what kind of my next, I suppose, maybe dilemma, I would say, is then how to do it in the right way. And I'm still discovering that now. I mean, I'll probably do plenty of things that are wrong or questionable. And I'm still learning and I'm still finding that out. But as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, that's a massive thing to get your head around. So I really just try to do my best with my intentions there, but also one of the other influences again with the religious side is that for my generation anyway, we've had a lot of, I suppose, I'm not sure how to put this or the correct word, but environmental society conflict, should I say, around our religion. Lots of things on the news, lots of discussions, good, bad, all kinds of things happening, which as a child you sort of understand but don't. You just know that they're talking about you and your people as a religion, as a society, but you don't know what's going on there. And I've never been one to sort of just, I suppose, not lay back, but I kind of I wanted to sort of really show other sides of us as a people, and Muslims in our religion. And at that time, the only real thing I had for myself or that I could influence was my writing. So in that way, it then became a little bit of, okay, I don't want to sort of exaggerate or use the wrong terms, but in a way it was my political stand, I suppose, that we can be in, out there in the world, in books and movies, and that there's nothing wrong with us as a people and our religion, and it's normalize it really. If more people know and read and can see that, why not? I mean, when was the last time you read about there's a Muslim or even an Asian in a book that wasn't the minority? And that was really aware of that when I was in high school, which I think was quite different from the rest of my friends. They didn't really was affected as much as me. So again, the only place where that was for my writing.
Exactly. I know, and actually that is the beauty of writing. I think if you're able to express yourself that way, I mean, it in itself can be quite cathartic depending on what you're kind of experiencing. But yeah, I mean, it's just so amazing that, at such a young age that you were able to start, or just start writing and having these ideas. And it's just really, I'm just like, I'm like in complete awe. So it's, I guess the other thing that is kind of coming to mind is, you mentioned in, I think it's the acknowledgement in the book. So you're kind of mentioning like your favorite like Japanese rock band, and I haven't heard of them, but there's like Gilgamesh. You know, you know, you've got the reference to like manga, and I know there's a lot of, you know, when it comes to comics and things, again, you know, I've very limited knowledge about these things. So again, is that something you were just like any other young person, you know, just kind of I guess exploring different things that, you know, you were seeing and watching, and then how did that play a part in your writing then, do you think?
I think you definitely said it there, that exploration again, that was happening in teenage years, as all teenagers do. So there were a lot of reference to Japanese culture, which I'm really interested in and still am, and so, which is why the main character is actually Japanese. And but yeah, so as a child, I really was into anime, manga, these kind of things. But as you mentioned, I'm even as from a young age, I'm very different to most people my age, and maybe also my skin color too, should I say? Sure. But I'm a massive fan of rock music, always have been since I was young, and that developed into sort of just somehow found it into Japanese rock music too. So that's definitely an element in there as well, which influenced a lot of my main character there. So things from his style to his looks to I have little Japanese phrases that I like to use in there as well to make it authentic, so that he speaks in Japanese sometimes as well. So yeah, that's definitely in there. But I think not to how do I put this? Not to sort of generalize or put into the box then of the typical, that's it, I'm now a manga geek, otaku kind of person, because what I've tried to kind of show is the mesh of all kinds of diverse cultures. So he is the only, in this book anyway, the next is different, but in this one he is the only Japanese character, but I've got Asian characters in there, I've got characters from Arab backgrounds and things, and that all, they sort of, you know, and they live together, they you know, interact, and though there's sort of elements in there that they discuss, but I didn't want that to be a big fuss, that wow, they're from different places and they can speak to each other. Well, they're all human. Wow, actually I take that back, Hero's half human, but let's he's half human, half vampire. But yeah, so but yes, at the time that I was writing that, I was just, again, more emphasize the fact that because I was so interested in all these different cultures and how they're the same but also different, and how, you know, the beauty of that came out in my book as well. No,
and it definitely does, and it's so refreshing to read something like that. And I think you're right. I think there's sometimes like an over emphasis on trying to, oh look, I've written a diverse book and I've got diverse, but actually if you kind of just are already ahead of that point where the you know, that's already a reality, right? And then you can kind of move on and start writing beyond that, which is so great. And I mean, can you talk a little bit, I think we've maybe got about 2 minutes left before we go to the break, but a little bit about your main character, Hero, and what is kind of the essence of it, just to give our listeners an idea. So yeah, I don't know if is that too wide a question?
Oh yes, I could go on forever, but just to give you a bit of a flavor, I suppose, to get you to understand, especially for those who are new to maybe fantasy or just starting there, is like, so so Hero, he's half Japanese, and he's sort of fallen into this world of magic and jinns and demons, because he is half vampire. So the important part there is that he's not like, I really wanted to make him, my novel, not the typical vampires that you would have seen or read. Again, high school influences there, but so he's possessed by a spirit, a sort of demon, which is just called a vampire because he's the host, so it needs him to survive. So they have like symbiotic relationship. But it's just happened to call it a vampire, so very different vampires to what you would have probably have seen and heard before. And yeah, and I suppose this book anyways is journey through stumbling through this world that he's fairly new to, and I suppose while he's sort of find his place in his job role of just sort of cleaning up the mess, as it said, when things go wrong, then things go really, really wrong when he gets attacked. So that's kind of moves it into the bigger storyline. But I think what I really enjoy about his character is that his interactions with so many different people. So you'll see it from his point of view mostly. And to see how he interacts with his friends, which have different cultures, and to see hopefully his way of thinking and feeling.
That's great, thank you. So that's definitely given us a flavour. We are just going to go to a break now. So we'll be back on the second half of the book club show. We are talking about The Sickness by Yazarah. So grab yourselves a cup of coffee and some biscuits, and we'll be back with you in a few moments. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Atif Nawaz. Listen to Inspire FM shows in your time by heading over to inspirefm.org or listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to the book club show on Inspire 105.1 FM. My name is Imrana Mahmood and I'm your host. We are talking today about a really, really interesting book called The Sickness by Yazarah, who is joined in the studio with me today. In the first half, we were talking a little bit about what's inspired her writing, what led her down kind of the route of fantasy, which I found really, really interesting to learn about. So we're just going to carry on the conversation. I'm also hoping Yazarah will read a little bit of the book as well to give you a flavour of what it's about. But first of all, just to welcome Yazarah back. So Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam.
Thank you again so much for your time and obviously the amazing conversation we had in the first half. I think where I wanted to start now was talking a little bit about how this book, so how The Sickness, was received by other people, because obviously you were mentioning in the first half where when you initially started writing, it was very much for yourself, it wasn't maybe necessary to share with other people. And I guess there's maybe a twofold question there. Firstly, how it felt for you when you first shared the work, and then how it was received as well.
Okay. Yeah, so that's like I said, it because it was so personal, it took me a very, very long time to share it with anyone. So I probably when I first finished the general draft of it, I shared it with one friend that I got a bit close to and trusted at that time. So and it felt nerve-wracking. I honestly felt like nothing else, like I've just been laying myself bare for this person, and then all kinds of thoughts were going on in my mind, mostly negative, all kinds of things. And yet at the same time, so it was one of those conflicts of I wanted to know what she thought, but then I didn't. So I was like, tell me something. Actually, no, don't tell me. So it really was, I'm sure I annoyed that friend. I think I mentioned in acknowledgements as well, actually, Sahifa, to no end with the questions that I had for her. So, but it was a massive relief once she'd finished it, and I felt, okay, it's all safe. It was all right that she read it. I'm okay. So it was a really big relief. And I think that was the first time I was like, oh my God, I love that feeling, that enjoyment of somebody else enjoying the writing. Because I at this point, I'd never, ever even considered it to me, it wasn't even a book yet. It was just a story, it was writing. It had no concept of it being a book.
Yeah.
But having her read that and enjoy it and just watching her reactions and hearing her feedback was amazing, good and bad at that time. So that was my personal feeling for that first time I shared it with her. But to be honest, it never got any easier after that. I can't say it got easier sharing it with other people. I'm pretty sure the process pretty much remained the same with every person I've shown it to. And then in general, how it was received. So again, at first, when I first wrote it in the very, very early days, it was received really well. And I think that was, again, encouragement from my friends. And then I always had that thought, is of course they're going to say good things. they're not going to say, but that's unfair to them because they're brutal. They don't lie to me, just because we're friends. Actually, they'd probably be even more harsher because they're my friends. So that's being unfair to them. So and then so it was received, and it was that excitement. I can still remember the day, the sort of the excitement of sharing that, and then them reading something that was for them was so different, that they hadn't read before. And then it was actually that very friend, Sifa, who actually encouraged me to actually turn it into a book and publish. But again, at 14 years old, that was a whole world that no concept of. So we were just going to sort of polish it up and create our own, make into our own book, bind it up, have a little cover, very childish again. So that was our plans for it. And then as for how it's received now, 10 years later, that I eventually did publish it 10 years later, I'll be honest, I had very mixed sort of reviews and thoughts on it for very different reasons. And again, to be honest, it's even now it's hard to take on all kinds of feedback, but I do. And so I think the one thing that I suppose I love the most, or makes me really, really satisfied, is when people say that they love the diversity, the culture, and having that voice, even in that small part of that, there's an Asian character who's not a minority for once, and they don't die in the first 5 minutes or something like that. Then and also the enjoyment of it being sort of a unique fantasy mixed with sort of this idea of we mentioned it slightly right at the beginning, but I work in mental health, and I've always been interested in that, and that kind of plays all the way through. Then also religion, and they're just like, either the people love that or they hate that. Either it's too much for them, or it's amazing and it's everything that they've wanted, which is totally fine, because my mind is a mess. I'll be the first one to admit to that. Right, ever since I can remember, that's my mind. It's all over, it's everything. It's all over in there. It's all or nothing for me. And it's been received that way. But I think the excitement is the best part of that. Whether that initial, whether it's for a person or not, and I'm totally happy with that, and I understand. So fantasy might not be for everybody, or even the classic genre, it's a vampire book, but it's not your typical vampire. But if someone's looking for, I want my traditional vampire, and they don't get that, it's totally understandable if that's not really their thing. That's okay. So I really do have a sort of mixed, and I think that's with all books, with anything really. It took me a few years to learn that and understand it in that way. That's it. And then I can tell you that there was excitement no end with my family and friends when they found out that I was publishing it. But I actually kept that a secret for a very long time too. I was again very, very reluctant, very quiet, and it was almost sort of under the table. Look, I did this. Don't tell anyone about this.
It's so nice to hear though, because it is, and I think it's interesting, and I think actually sometimes the best books are the ones that almost polarize people in their thinking, and it's the best, it generates good discussion, and just like you're saying, if it's not the regular vampire, people not feeling fully satisfied, but actually deal with it, right? So no, I think it's so good actually just listening to you, because obviously I think the vulnerability that comes with not only writing but then sharing, and then to share a platform when it's actually published is like absolutely massive. So absolute kind of respect for you completely for doing it and doing it so well as well. So obviously you mentioned the fact that obviously you're working at the moment in terms of mental health, and obviously that, like you said, it does come through the book. Obviously it's even mentioned in the blurb. Now again, coming maybe back to slightly the faith aspect of it, obviously in maybe Muslim communities where, I mean, mental health is something which is considered taboo across the board, right? But obviously even when it comes to our own communities as well, we maybe aren't very forthcoming with it. So what do you think is, so how do you think maybe the book that you've written might help start those conversations, or at least make them, I don't know, a bit easier to have? I mean, I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, well, just first of all, what you were saying that in that, I think first the way sort of mental health has looked and received in our community is we've gone a lot further than it was before. So we've and I think that comes down to understanding.
Yeah.
It really does, that understanding. And like you were saying, conversations. How do you bring that up? How do you talk about these things and not have it in the corner, shameful, don't talk about it, brush it under the carpet? And I'm not saying my book is an inspiration in any way for the fight for that, but I would hope, and I think I can't be completely honest with my intentions there because it was so long ago, but the fact that it's even talked about and mentioned, it was a big thing for me anyway, especially with family and friends who did struggle with mental health at that time for me. So having that sort of integrated within the book is I think something that I suppose goes back down to similar to what we're talking about culture, normalizing it. It's there, it's obvious, it's not hidden away, and I suppose for me anyway, writing it, but also maybe for readers as well, it's a relatively safe place as well in a book, because it's not real, it's a fantasy and it's not yours, it's you're reading another person's work and mind and things, so you can have a level of distance so it doesn't harm you emotionally anyway, and so I would hope that at least in that way, having it so prominently mentioned throughout and certain aspects of it would bring that up. But also I think I've highly have a high regard for the idea of mental health is in everybody. It's about good and bad or poor mental health, but mental health is there. It's like your physical health. So what's there not to talk about, really? So and also the idea of without, I suppose, being conscious of it or really knowing it, but books and reading and writing connects pretty directly with your mind and your mental health, because that's what it's all about. That's where it's there.
Yeah.
So when you lose yourself in a book and you in like escapism, that is for your mental health. That's what you do. It's healthy in a way that mindfulness is healthy, because you're grounded in it's a little bit of a oxymoron there, but you're grounded in fantasy.
Yeah.
I did a bit of a study on this when I was doing my master's, but about the idea of fantasy in a fantasy world, or sort of an imaginary world, how it can be healthy, it can be good for you, because we need it as humans living in such a chaotic world. I mean, why else would children have such prominent imaginations? Why else would they, and how children process things? What do you use? You use stories, you use imagination, you manifest it in something outside of themselves. But as adults, we do that too, but it's just that we don't allow ourselves to do that, or to recognize that's what we are doing. But that's what it is. So that's just one, I suppose, manifestation or outlet of our mental health, good, bad, poor, ugly, all of that. But that's all part of it. And so but I would definitely, I'm not going to say this book sort of like champions that in any way, I'm not saying that, but it definitely kind of brings it up throughout. And then to just to bring in a little second point there, which is again sort of going back to my own experiences and history, is that again separating the idea of what is mental health and what is from our culture and our religion, magic and jinns and things, and other forces, which are it's there. I'm not saying believe it, but then what's the difference? How do you know when is it that somebody needs actual help? And when is it both? That's it. You don't have, just because you're talking about one, for example, just the mental health, it could be depression, anxiety, anything like that. Just because you're emphasizing talking about one or addressing that maybe from a medical perspective or something, doesn't mean you're discounting anything else.
No, of course.
There is that balance. There is both. It doesn't have to be one or the other, yes or no. You can't. It's all there. It's all aspects of it, and I think it's important to be able to talk about that and mesh that together, which is why I have all those elements in the book there.
No, and I know I completely echo, I think, what you're saying, because it is that things sometimes can get conflated, but again, putting things in boxes and making everything into like a binary thing is just never helpful, because like we're human, we are literally, we can't really be confined to anything in that sense. So for sure, no, I mean, those are really important points that you've raised. So I was wondering whether you'd be able to share like a small reading of the book, again, mostly for my own enjoyment. Because I want to hear you read it, but also, yeah, just to give our listeners an idea of what this kind of the essence of the story is.
Yeah, sure. If you can stand my voice.
Absolutely.
Sure. Okay. So I'll just read an extract from chapter 6, Blood Deception. So you'll get a flavor of hero in the world there, but you also get introduced to one of the other main characters, Ray. Okay. So midnight, the pain became unbearable. Ripping through his body, the beast was fighting him, fiercely trying to gain control. He couldn't hold on any longer. Hero usually went to feed at Maghrib, but well before Isha started, which is at sunset, but before full dark. Since he lived on the thin balance of the human world and the other dimension, and time ran a little differently in both, he followed a more straightforward time system so he could keep up with both worlds. Also, to keep up with the night creatures that lived in the forest, he followed a lunar calendar now. Those creatures came out after Asr, the precious time before sunset, so he avoided going out at that time. Though he knew the spirit clan wouldn't harm him, there were still many other things that might try their luck with him. It was stupid putting it off for this long. His beast was always more powerful at night, but he refused to feed until it became an absolute necessity. But the constant struggle made him weak, leaving him physically and mentally exhausted. He crept out of his bedroom, not taking as much care as he usually would, hoping Ray would still be knocked out, flinching when the wood creaked beneath him. Ray woke with a jolt. She lay completely still for a moment, her body instantly tense, immediately alert. Ray didn't remember any injections this time, but she knew it hadn't been a natural sleep. Again, she wasn't strapped down or chained, and that made her infinitely more suspicious. Eyes still closed, she listened for the slightest movement. When she was sure she was alone, she opened her eyes slowly, but it was still dark. Ray sat up and looked around frantically. She felt herself begin to panic. Why couldn't she see anything? Was she blind? Ray stopped herself. She refused to be so weak as to panic, and with much trained mental discipline, she shoved the useless emotions away and steadied her breathing so she could assess the situation. No, she wasn't blind, and for that she thanked God sincerely. Her eyes eventually adjusted, and she could just make out the silhouette of the dressing table and cupboard. Ray took a deep breath. It had been a long time since she'd seen darkness, and it took a while for her eyes to adapt and her lungs to realize they could still breathe. The doctors never let her have darkness. She was always assaulted by the harsh lights in her cell.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for reading that. That is really, I mean, definitely, I mean, people could probably tell, whoever's listening, that I would obviously recommend reading it, and I'm obviously finding out what happens next. So actually, even just talking a little bit about what you've just read, I mean, so again, we were talking a little bit about mental health, and obviously the fact that there's two, well, more than that, in terms of realms, there's kind of whatever is real and then what's not real. But then, like, who is to judge reality in that sense, so there's a lot kind of thinking going on. But what is it about the doctors? So, you talk about doctors, they're capital D, and, where is that kind of element come into it? Like we've just, well, I say we're just going through, we kind of still are in terms of pandemic and all these conversations we're having around the vaccine and science, and how did that play a part in the story, do you think?
To be honest, because I wrote this a long time ago, there's no such thing as a pandemic there, so that played absolutely no role in that. But in terms of so yes, I mentioned doctors and capital D and things like that, and so that goes back to what we're talking about, our perception of mental health. So especially in our community, and as a child, because when I wrote this I very much was 14 years old, still a child, but when family members and family were going through mental health, it was very much that scary institutionalized world, or part of our society there. So going to the doctors is bad, or they might take them away, or they put medication, and it was all this really, B-movie horror side of being locked up in an asylum. It really was, and that's how our understanding of was it, So that in my character, so here, Ray, she was in a mental institution, and of course that plays a bigger part of the rest of the story. So in no way, it's not a normal institution. It's not no reflection on the NHS. Don't worry. But yes, and so this is so kind of for her in her mind, she capitalizes doctors with a D because I emphasize that because that's what they are as beings. There's no names, there's no singularity individuals. They're just the doctors because they control things and they do everything, and you're just there. In her case, where just whatever treatment or whatever they were doing to her, it was done to her. She had no idea what was going on. So in that way, doctors themselves were an entity in a way. That being. But yes, and you might have been able to tell there's a few things where you think that's not quite normal anyway. So she does have her own issues there. But when she was in the institute, she so I don't know if the reference was very clear there, but when she talked about not being able to see the darkness because the lights were always on in her cell, so they never switched off. So when she reached this place where basically she's with where Hero is, and it's just night. That's all that darkness was. It's just nighttime. It's natural darkness. But for her, it's so scary. It's this new. I'm outside. I'm in the real world, and there's no. The balls aren't there. The harsh lights aren't there. It's like for her, that's the alien world being out there in the real world.
No, you obviously that you can allude to that, I guess, while you're reading it, and I know I can't remember if it was part of the same chapter, but again, this notion of when we think that maybe if someone is kind of going through mental health issues and how that might affect on faith, that there's a part here I'm just going to read out, because it says feeling herself start to lose it again, she slipped into that dark state, a still state. She used to distance herself and prayed, oh God, please guide me, I'm lost, I trust in you completely, my Lord, I trust in your will, please help me, I don't know what it is I'm looking for, maybe the truth, I don't know what I need, I don't know how much more I can take, you know your creation best, so please help me, Lord of all that is in the heavens and the earth, keep me strong. And I read that and I was just really touched by it, and I think this is what's really lovely about the story, because and especially I guess specifically in Inspire FM, obviously we've got a majority Muslim audience, and that kind of continuous references coming back to obviously kind of the faith aspect, I think is really lovely to read about as well. And I know, but we're kind of getting to the end of the show in like about 2-3 minutes, and I guess a couple of things, like what advice do you have for like other young people, aspiring writers out there, if they want to write, or maybe they've already written something and don't know what to do next? What advice do you have for them?
I think first, write what you enjoy and write what you know. So don't let it become a chore. So it can easily fall into that trap of sort of forcing yourself to write just because maybe you've started something. But also, depending on sort of how you're looking at something, if you do want to publish and do want to write a book, which is absolutely fine, but it's easy to think, oh, what is it that the readers might want, or what's popular now? That's not always the best way to look at something. So sometimes it works, sometimes it's okay, it's good, but then in some ways you're forcing it. So let's say you truly are passionate about writing contemporary fiction, but in the market everyone's into action adventure now, and you force yourself to write a genre you're not actually that interested in. So I would say really enjoy what you're doing, and keep at it. So for this, I think I revised it at least, no exaggeration, 10 times about. So don't be afraid to do that. So it hurts at first when you have to delete things. It hurts, but it's all for the better and for the development of it. So don't be afraid to go over the same thing over and over again if you're developing that plot. And I suppose be true to yourself. You are, without whether you realize it or not, or manifests in different ways, there's going to be pieces of yourself in that. So if if you're going to be afraid of that, you're going to end up holding back, and that shows in your story, which I can relate to, because I did with this one, which is different to the one I'm currently writing. But I know, even if the readers can't, I know where I held back. I know where I didn't put my all in because I was afraid.
Sure.
And I think in the long run, personally, you might regret that. So yeah, write what you enjoy, keep at it, and be true to yourself and enjoy it. But also, whether you've written a book, whatever stage that you're at, or are planning to, I think the next really, really important thing is how to take on feedback. So and reviews. So you're gonna get awful ones, terrible ones. You're gonna get trashed. You're gonna get. Then focus on the good ones, and even the bad ones. If there's anything that's actually constructive criticism, take it on board. Just like with anything else, and use it to help you to better yourself. And then some reviews where you think actually that's not really warranted, let it go. Kind of what we talked about before. If someone never read a vampire book, maybe, for example, or they hate vampires, or they hate fantasy, and they read it and then they trash it, then you're like, well, okay, that's not on me then, is it? So you gotta think a bit smart when it comes to the reviews and feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just to end, so where can people buy a copy of The Sickness, and when can they buy maybe whatever's next in the pipeline?
Yeah, so it's available on most online bookstores, so Amazon, Waterstones. You can also publish it. You can also purchase it directly from my publishers, Austin Macaulay Publishers. But it's on most online websites. And the sequel, so the one that's following this, is called Dark Destiny, and it's in the works at the moment, so still in the editing process. So hopefully, inshallah, it will be published later on this year, at the end of this year or beginning of next year. Things have been a bit delayed because of COVID, so it's a little bit hard to say, but inshallah, it should be coming out soon, called Dark Destiny.
Fantastic. Okay, we look forward to that. And thank you again, Yazarah, so much for your time today. That was the book club show, and we were talking about The Sickness by Yazarah. I will be back in a couple of weeks with a new book and new conversations. Until then, please keep us in your du'as, and we will see you soon. Okay, assalamu alaikum.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Why not tune in to our live stream at inspirefm.org and follow and subscribe to our social media platforms at Inspire FM Luton.